Hey everybody, Bryan CP Steele here, and welcome to another episode of Tales from a Professional Nerd. Today's episode is episode 13, The Edition Wars. We'll get into more about what that all means after we do the normal, what's the week been like for Bryan? Well, if you follow me on Twitter, if you follow me on Facebook, you may have seen that I've been in kind of a blue kind of in a blue period, and I don't mean that like, Renaissance art, the blues. Although the painting commission I'm working on right now is mostly shades of blue, which is all kind of coincidental. It is actually, it's just been kind of a rough week for Bryan. I mentioned earlier in an episode weeks ago that freelance life is awesome. It's great to be able to work for all the different people that you can work for and get to do what you want and not be bound by these restrictive non-compete clauses and things like that. But I also did mention that sometimes monetarily it is difficult, feast and famine kind of thing. This week had really kind of shown itself in the early parts of the week that it was going to be a hard one. That it was going to be a lot of kind of making sure that things were coming together to get bills paid and things. This episode is not going to be a sad one. The week has ended, or is ending much better than it started. I just wanted to make sure that everybody knew that who does follow me on these things that might have seen some messages that some statuses and some shares and things that were negative or down, as that I try to be a pretty positive person, that things are looking better. And I'm going to get into that. So the beginning part of the week, things were looking pretty rough. I had mentioned on Facebook, I'm not going to name any names because that would be rude. And frankly, I don't hold any ill will toward the company. But one of my clients, who owes me a fair amount of money, is having some troubles of their own. The industry is what the industry is. And what that meant is that a significant portion of my monthly wages were not available to me. So that has put me in a little bit of a crunch mode to get things done and get some other projects finished that need to get finished, which are well on their way, and things are looking great now. In fact, so this week has, aside from doing some painting commissions, I did finish a new alien proxy sculpt that I don't have it painted yet. So we'll see if I want to reveal this critter. Players of Dark Age will recognize it closer to. It is very similar to the art for the bloat. Basically, it's this big, tall, bulbous, slithery tentacle thing that spits fire and acid at people. It's gross. It's a gross critter. But the original model for it that Simon had put out is difficult to find, we'll say, and doesn't look like the new art. So I tried to make one that is much closer to the new art. Big thanks to Philip Dishon, or Dishon, for kind of helping me and kind of poking me along to get that thing finished. He knows what I'm talking about, so thanks. In fact, yours is going to be winging its way to you soon. So the week ended, is ending much better. I am about ready. I want to say in about a week or so, I get to start a project with Crafty Games, the guys who do Spycraft and Mistborn. I've done a little work for them in the past, but I've known Alex and those guys for a really long time, from way back before my Mongoose days. And Alex reached out to me recently and asked me to, if I was available to help out with some things, and I obviously am. So yet again, cool stuff gets added to the CV, and hopefully, if everything comes to fruition with them, I'll be able to tell you about some really, really cool projects in the future with Crafty. I signed on to do some more writing work with Dungeon in a Box. Again, my last so I run. If you haven't paid attention to all the episodes, I do run a Dungeon in a Box game for some of my locals, and we're having a lot of fun with it. It's a great game. It's a great setting. We're having a good time. The last session had to get canceled, or rather had to get postponed because of some scheduling errors and whatnot. Grown-up life as it is, and we haven't played in a while, and it's bugging me because they are so many sessions behind what I'm writing now in that plot line and that plot arc for Dungeon that I want to be able to see their reactions to these things. But it's going to be a while. It's going to be quite a while before they see that. So we'll see how that goes. Let's see what else. I've got a really awesome business meeting with the guys from Blacklist Games, Adam and Brady Sadler. I don't know. I haven't really discussed with them about the idea of what I can share, what I can't share. So I don't want to get too deep into it, but I've known those guys for years as well. They're relatively local. They're only about an hour south of me. So we're going to meet up for dinner and discuss some potential awesomeness. Hopefully some stuff that I'll be able to get you guys on board with as well. But the two big news, I would say, in the life of Bryan, no movie mention intended. No pickle juice today. I had a really good conversation with one of my former colleagues, and the I don't know if he's the owner or the CEO or the CFO or I don't know his official job title other than awesome guy and dude in charge over at Big Child Creatives. So Big Child Creatives is an art studio first and foremost, and they make amazing stuff. The art they produce is top notch. The miniatures they make are breathtaking. Several of their staff members are Golden Demon, Golden Sword, Crystal Brush winning painters and sculptors. They're fantastic. If you haven't had a chance to take a look at their stuff, they're based out of Spain. I'm going to put a link to their website in the description. I'm also going to put a link to their Kickstarter that's currently going on, the Traders of Cobberland, which is part of their Black Sailors universe. Black Sailors is a inhuman pirate and shipping genre. So it's got a bunch of like troll and orc pirates in miniature form, and some in like painting bust form and whatnot. But they're gorgeous. They're beautiful. They really need to do more with that. I don't want to call it a license, but like that world and that setting, because it's theirs, and they need to do more with that. But their Kickstarter is for an expansion that's not trolls and goblins. It's like gnomes and dwarves in this world, and they're very stylized and they're very, very cool. And there is one of the models that was just unlocked, I think, or was unlocked early. It was like one of the stretch goals. That is like a gnomish aviator riding a pelican, and it is one of the coolest models. It's traditionally sculpted, not digitally sculpted, traditionally sculpted by Patrick Mason. And it's just, again, these models are gorgeous. If you get a chance, click on the link. They are a little bit expensive, but if you're really only looking into buying like one for like an art piece or a convention piece, or my hobbyists out there that do contests, these are perfect for contests or big dioramas or things like that. I know I'm going to get my hands on some when I can. They're phenomenal. So all of that background said, Big Child, Jose and the rest of Big Child were who I dealt with when I was in charge of Dark Age over at CMON. When I was when I was in charge of Dark Age, they were the ones that made 90% of our models. And most of our concept art and a lot of our masters and things came from them. And the revitalization of Dark Age in those last couple of years that I was there really was due to their artistry and their just brilliant paint jobs, and they're amazing artists. And getting to work with Jose was awesome. He's a great guy. He's very understanding, super friendly, and has a good head on his shoulders when it comes to business type stuff. So earlier this week, their Kickstarter launched for the Traders of Cobberland, and I reached out to Jose because I initially really just kind of wanted to congratulate him on a fantastic Kickstarter, and it turned into a much bigger conversation, which still has yet to come to any true ends, but I've got a lot of things to discuss with them, and I'm hoping that one or more of the things that we discussed become reality. And as soon as they do, I will come on here and I will be flag waving and telling you about how you need to, back them and, get excited for the things to come. And so all of this, that's all the stuff that I really, this week has been a roller coaster of negative financials and positive future possibilities and conversations of things being set up for the future. We put out put out the first commercial for the Spelljammer charity game, which I wish I was better at special effects and things. Even if they were like cheesy 80s special effects, I would have added like some zap something. I don't know, but I would have done something with it. But we put out that. I revealed the first two members of the crew to people who are following the event page for that event, which I'll make sure to link below. It's like I said, it's just been a really kind of a roller coaster of a week, and as of yesterday, I decided that I was going to try to, on some of my extra hours, or when I'm waiting for things to cure, or if I hit a writer's block, or if I've just got a couple hours to kill before I really kind of get in the studio, or maybe even before the kids get home or something, I made the decision that I was gonna give this whole Lyft driver thing a try. Again, anything to really kind of supplement the income when things are slow, without chaining myself to a retail desk, or getting back into a punch and a clock regular thing that will take away from the things that I need to do for my career. I already kind of do a side, my side gig of selling things on eBay. I already have, I take the side commission work, things like that. I kind of view this as this is another side gig to help pad the income from my career. And one of my best friends of all time has been driving for Lyft for, God, I think almost 2 years now at this point, and he swears by it. He has said again and again and again that they treat him well. He's never had a super bad experience. Nothing that's wanted to scare him off from it. And it's not like I live in downtown New York or on the south end of San Francisco or something where I've got to compete with hours of traffic or anything like that. I live in a relatively small town, and there's people out there that might need help. And I want to say that we've got maybe 2 cab companies in town, but I've never seen any of them driving. I've never seen one in motion. So I was like, you know what, I'll give it a shot. And earlier this week, I filled out all the requisite forms and used my buddy's hey, this guy wants to, or what is that called? Not requisition form. That sounds weird. Recommendation. Use my buddy's recommendation code to get me set up, and I set out. Gave myself basically 2 hours yesterday away from the studio. I had to take my son to his mother's house anyway. So I was like, you know what? I will spend a little extra time in the car and see what happens. And it was neat. It was interesting. For someone like me who loves to talk and loves to meet people, and I've never met a microphone I didn't like. It's the same thing with generally speaking, unless you are an absolute jerk, I don't mind having a conversation with you, even if it's short-lived. And so, I wasn't crazy busy. I wasn't super swamped. I was able to get a little work done on my phone, planning meetings and things in between fairs. But it's interesting. It's not something that I would say, oh my God, I have to do every day, but we'll see. We'll see how it goes. Maybe I'll get some cool stories to come back here and tell you guys. The moral of that story, though, is that sometimes as a freelancer, you gotta do whatever it takes to make ends meet. And whatever it takes can be selling off things that you don't need anymore. Things that you've acquired over the years that you've looked at 100 times and said, man, that'd be cool if we played that, but we don't. Being realistic, and someone out there might need it. Someone out there might want it, might get use out of it. Think of it like the toys from Toy Story. I've got guys in my closet that have not seen the light of day since the turn of the century. And if they were alive, if they were little Toy Story dudes, they would crack open their eyes and come out into the light and be like, they'd be scary monsters because they haven't been out in forever. They would be from the island of forgotten toys. And there could be somebody out there, who can play with them and love them properly. Again, I'm revealing a lot about my weird inner mechanisms, so this part of the video is always kind of rambly. But yeah, you just gotta do what you gotta do to make sure that you get your stuff done. And if you have a clean driving record and a decent car and you want to throw a few hours at it, give Lyft a shot. See what happens. I don't know. Hell, maybe throw my name down, and I don't even know if that matters. I have no idea how that works. Like I said, brand new, not a big deal. It is a weird thing, and hopefully it will come up with some really cool stories, and that's really all life is a collection of memories and stories. So if I can gather all that stuff up in the meantime, more power to me. Alright, so all of that aside, let's let all these things that I'll be linking to in the description, so you have stuff to follow. Let's say that this week, like I said, was kind of a roller coaster, but I'm still very positive, and I think that once we get through these kind of rocky week or so, and when my client comes through and all of this stuff comes together, if everything I'm lining up comes together the way that I think that it should, my next couple of months are going to be crazy amounts of fun, and I get to do a lot of different things. So here's to hoping. All right, so let's get to the episode. Let's get to the actual topic at hand. In last week's episode, I made a sideways comment during the design chat about games moving into new editions and people being gun shy. The edition wars is what I've always called it. I've called them the edition wars for as long as there have been games that have shifted editions. And like most people, it has affected me in negative ways because of my own look at things. For the uninitiated or the people who don't realize what I'm talking about, a lot of games, particularly role-playing games and miniature games, will have, rather than making sequels to themselves, kind of like board games do and card games, like sequels or expansions, while they will also have that, they will have times where, after so many years, a game is completely revamped. Whether it is the rule set has changed or just tweaks or adding in the frequently asked questions and the errata and swirling it all together and like, all right, here's the second edition, or in some cases third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh. Warhammer 40k, I believe, is on its 8th edition right now, and that's technically 9th if you count Rogue Trader, which was not 40k, but it was in the 40k universe. Yeah. These editions, the reason why I call it an edition war is because every time this happens, every single time a game shifts on us, there are always 3 camps of people. 2 very, almost like American politics, 2 very large camps of people. Oh my God, the world is ending, my game is dying, this new edition is going to be terrible, woe is me, to the positives of, oh, this new edition is everything I want. They're going to fix all these problems. I won't need my house rules. I'll play this game again because of the new edition. And then there's this tiny little independent section in the middle that are either unaffected because they're like, either, I'll just play it the old way, or this won't affect me because I just won't buy the new one. Or, like the ones who just started kind of sitting back to see what happens. Very rarely are there neutrals in gamers. Gamers tend to be hyperbolic by nature. On a scale of 1 to 10, they are often a -1 or a 13. Very rarely do you get someone who's just, just rolls with it. And that's just the way we are. We tend to have very powerful personalities, one way or the other. Powerful in the way that we are commanding and I don't say charismatic, but the power behind your personality. You're very out there and bold and pow. Or the opposite. You're like a turtle shell. You're thick walls because you are so socially drawn in, and I've got my group of friends and people I talk to, and I don't need to worry about the outside world. We tend to fall into those 2 categories, and the edition wars are because of are a result of that. Is every single time a game shifts, there will always be people that will fight tooth and nail to not have this change happen. And unless you are actually part of that game company who's making the product, or the board of directors that is pushing the idea, or whatever, unless you're actually directly involved with that, not only is that going to happen, not only are there going to be new editions of this game, but it's going to continue to happen. So the reason why, in my opinion, that the edition wars happen is that people get comfortable with what they've got, and they don't want to see their current game, their current chronicle, their current tournament, whatever they've got going on, their current army list, they don't want to see it change to the point where they've got to relearn a bunch of things, because a lot of these games that require, practice and skill is, if you change things up on me, it's going to reset part of that clock of my aptitude. Now, it's going to reset the clock for everybody. And some people will forget that, that everybody's got to relearn the system. Everybody's got to learn these changes. But they will still, see it as, oh man, the next time I go to a tournament, there's all this new stuff that I need to remember. What if I forget? Or what if this guy's better at it than I am? What if he has more time to pore over these books? What if he's some kind of crazy, gamer savant and looks through the book once and goes, I know everything. I am a robot. You'd have that problem with anything. You can't blame it on the shift from second to third edition. You just gotta realize that that's something that's going to happen. Even if they didn't change the game edition, but they did alter your current army. They put out some new errata. You're gonna need to learn that too. Games they shouldn't be completely static. That's not to be saying that chess does not have its place. Chess is awesome. I love playing chess with my kid. It's just that a lot of these games, a lot of these more malleable games, these long-standing, rabid fan base games, they shift these editions to fix problems, to alter if they've seen how every tournament the person who the top 3 spots are always these kinds of armies. That's probably a design flaw and needs to get fixed. And rather than rather than admitting that, hey, this is a mistake, it is easier to wrap that stuff. It is better for the PR of the company to wrap all of those oops, we screwed ups, wrap the fixes in with just actually new things that you've thought, and new things like, this would be cool, let's add that, rather than just saying, hey, this will be cool, let's add that. You save these up long enough until it's got a modicum of change that you can implement in one fell swoop and call it a new edition. I would like to think that businesses do this because the games need fixing, or that they find problems and they need to find new ways to circumvent it. I am well aware that there is another very, very important facet as to why companies shift editions. And the primary reason, and so you go to any gamer forum, any Facebook group, and look at the comments. I know, rule number 1, don't read the comments. But you look at the comments, and a lot of what they have to say is, oh, this company is just trying to screw us over. They just want more money, for the longest time, and I don't even know if it's still the case, Games Workshop, the makers of Warhammer Fantasy, Age of Sigmar, Shadespire, all of that, Warhammer 40k, they are, in the miniatures game world and a little bit in the board game world, easily the largest manufacturer. They are, when you go into a game store, when it comes to the game itself, they've got paint racks, they've got models, they've got games, they've got events, they've got special huge standees, they've got toys, they've got hobby supplies. They've got all these things that are all branded under Games Workshop. And on top of all of that, they've been doing this for a long time. And they are enormous and huge and super profitable. And part of the reason why that is because they understand how the cycle works. And the cycle of editions is not something that is just done to refresh, well, we need a new breath of fresh air. Things were getting stale. It's not just that. It's partially that, I'm sure. I'm sure there's somebody, on GW's board of directors and that, has heard the voices and say, yep, nope, people are not happy. It's been too long. This game is getting stale and getting stagnant. And the other primary reason, in my opinion, I can't say this for fact, but just educated opinion and seeing the data before me from years of experience and the number of editions we've gone through, is they shift editions also when it's time to kind of remind everybody, hey, this game is awesome and you should play it. Kind of to put a shot of adrenaline into the game system. It gets people excited again. It makes people talk about it. It's on everybody's Facebook blogs and all of this stuff. And for the game stores and the retailers, they are always big sellers. Even if somebody has played 40K the last 7 editions, they might still just pick up the 8th edition book so they can read it. And that, in and of itself, is huge for everyone. It's huge for the store, it's huge for Games Workshop, it's huge for the distributor, it's huge for the gaming market, because it's a lot of activity, it's a lot of positive people doing stuff, getting, kind of putting juice back into the machine. Now, like I said, I've fallen victim to it. If sometimes that initial reaction to the new edition is less than favorable, it can sour you to the game completely for years. And you might step away, you might sell your stuff, you might, be more drastic in the case of several YouTube sensations of people burning their armies, and which is just silly. Sell it on eBay. Someone out there wants it. Don't destroy what could be an awesome charity. Imagine if you've got a bunch of D&D books that are suddenly no longer they're no longer supported for the new edition, and the new edition you don't like. You've looked at these books and you're like, meh, I'm not a fan. They've changed too much. It's not my old game. Whatever your reasoning might be as to why you're not into the new edition, it's fine. It could be valid reasons. Probably are for you. As everything is an opinion, they are valid for you. Instead of going on eBay and burning your old books in protest of this new edition, which is going to happen regardless, by the time you've heard about it, it's happening. Rather than doing that, take those books, wrap them up, bring them down to your local library, and see if they'll take a donation. There could be someone out there who's never picked up a D&D book. You could accidentally create new gamers for you to play with just by getting them excited in seeing this might be their first role-playing book they've ever picked up. They go, I've heard of Dungeons and Dragons. I saw them talking about it on Rick and Morty or whatever, and they pick up this book, they read a couple of chapters and go, this is fantastic. And that could be your next gamer that walks into the game store and says, I really would like to play. I got this book, and now I'm sure the game store is going to say, well, that book's outdated, here's this new one, and try and sell them on something or whatever. But again, positives, that's good stuff. It's positive stuff for the industry. It's good for the store, it's good for the groups, it's good for the economy of gaming. One of the best reasons why games shift editions, a lot of gamers, especially older gamers who have been playing the same game for 30 years, I still play 2nd edition AD&D all the time. It's not to say that you're not doing the right thing. You're having a good time. Awesome. You're playing your games. Sweet. But you have to admit, you are behind the times when it comes to the products. And you have not added any new money to the industry. You haven't brought any new blood in. but you're still having a good time, and that's awesome. Aside from that, most people update their collections, and that is something that these businesses rely on. For a while there, D&D was kind of floundering. Back in actual AD&D, right before the first OGL came out, and we got that giant D20 swell of third-party creators and adventurers everywhere. Right before that happened, there was a real big dip in role-playing. It was still, we had battled the satanic panic, the fundamentalist right, they had really stopped being front and center about how D&D role-playing was summoning devils, and these gamers were getting too deep into it and killing homeless people with pocket knives like Tom Hanks in Mazes and Monsters, which, rent it. It's something. But we had kind of come out on the other side of that. They had stopped talking about us as much, because they had found new targets in like NWA and D. Snyder, and the music industry had kind of taken over as being the target for the fundies. So thanks, Eazy-E and D. Snyder, you guys rule. But it roughly around that time is when we saw a shift in the game, where it stopped being about 500 source books. I remember when I was in high school, when I went to go play D&D, I had a duffel bag that was 3 feet long, black pleather, that the zipper was broken on it because of how much weight that it carried. But I would have, I would say, at least 50 pounds of books in there, maybe closer to 70. I had to two-hand it, and I had to over the shoulder it if I was going to walk more than like 30 feet. But that edition of the game really kind of supported that. It was the source book. Here's 15 like pleather-bound complete guides to this that all had rules in them that everybody wanted, and they were all awesome, and everything was legal. And when the edition shifted to 3rd edition, and all of that stuff became null and void, to my high school brain, the end of the world had just hit. The meteor had struck, and I was about ready to enter the nuclear winter of role-playing, because there was no way that I was going to rebuy all this duffel bag full of stuff. And in my, 17-year-old head, I couldn't figure out that the only thing that really changed are the number crunching, the rules, the crunchy part of the rules, the narrative, the story behind it, the descriptions. All the rest of that stuff in those books was still perfectly fine. So I sort of gave up on D&D for a little while. Very short amount of time. And then 3.5 rolled around. Bloop, bloop, bloop. And 3.5 was like a breath of fresh air. It was at that point I was so starved for D&D role playing. I was doing all kinds of White Wolf stuff. I was playing in some Marvel Fazrip games. I was all over the place. But D&D really wasn't top of my charts at that moment, because I did not care for that initial 3rd ed launch. And then 3.5 came around, and I know there wasn't a huge shift. There wasn't a dramatic change between 3 and 3.5. I couldn't tell you what those changes were, but it was enough, and my mindset had changed enough in those couple of years that this new D&D was the best ever. Oh my god, 3.5 was, I ate it up with a spoon. and I ran 12 games, and I had 15 different characters in college, and it was insane. And on top of this, there were all of these third-party creators that were making their own games, their own settings, their own, they had really figured out this whole open gaming license, and it was the world was my gaming oyster, and I don't like oysters, so we'll say the world was my gaming stir fry, and I was just gobbling it up, and I felt almost like renewed vigor when this edition changed. I bought books I didn't read for weeks. I filled my bookshelf with 3.5 source books of stuff that I probably would never use, but man, did it look cool, and man, was it awesome to have. And that kind of rush of new, that thrill of the new, the new love of my life, is exactly what creating a new edition is about. Yeah, like I said, it's partly fixing problems, it's partly making a new system, or making the new company people happy. But it really is. It's about that shot of adrenaline, that rush of new that surges a game to the forefront. I mean, how often have you ignored something for a long time, not because it's bad? I love BattleTech. I adore it. I've got my painted lance over there. I haven't played in years and years and years, except for like video game stuff. And as soon as I heard that there was like a new BattleTech edition coming out, my ears perked up. I dusted off my models, and I was like, all right, let's do this. Let's play some BattleTech. I still haven't done it yet, but I'm excited to. Shadowrun, for instance. When I was talking to Jason Hardy about doing some work for them at Adepticon, when he let me know that there was this 6th edition coming. I knew there was a 6th edition, the 6th World thing coming before the press announcement, because I helped work with some of it. And when I heard there was a new edition coming, I've been playing Shadowrun for a while. We just started a new 5th edition game that I had this kind of like little hop jump. There was a little voice in the back of my head that was like, ooh, what are we going to do about our 5th ed stuff? But that little voice was drowned out almost immediately when Jason started describing to me what 6th World was going to be about. Like, what are the changes? What are they doing to further the story as well as the rules mechanics? And I started getting that little gamer tingle of, okay, cool, I can't wait to play some 6th ed. And I hadn't even, we had already made characters for this new 5th ed game. We hadn't even played our first session of that yet, and I was suddenly getting excited over this new edition. And that's what companies are betting on. Why they invest this money into all this game research and play testing and new writers and new authors and creating several months worth of work to create this new version of a game. It's there because they know that investment is going to pay off if the end product does what it's supposed to do, and that is get you excited about that genre, that license, that IP again. It's the I almost just quoted Reservoir Dogs in a terrible way. You want that excitement again. You want it to feel not like you're running through the motions. Not like, well, we've been playing D&D for so long, I know every monster. You want to be excited. And this is not to say that new editions sometimes don't do what they're supposed to do. Speaking of D&D, so currently we're in the era of D&D 5e, who's been around for a handful of years now at this point. I think 3 or 4 years, maybe 5. I'd have to look it up, but I do believe that 5th Ed D&D is, if not it is a close contender to the cleanest and best D&D we've had thus far. It'd be real hard to top 3.5, or not 3.5, AD&D second edition, with, kits, and it'd be real hard to top that, but it's close. And I think the longer that 5e exists, the stronger it will get, as new source books and new things kind of strengthen that brand. Now, eventually, when there is a 6th Ed that rolls out, we will have to pay attention, and hopefully it will be strong and solid. But up until then, we just have to kind of keep playing this awesome version we've got. Part of the reason why I think 5e is so well accepted and kind of universally thought of as a fantastic version of D&D is that 4th Ed, D&D 4, was a bit of a misstep. I am not going to badmouth the system. I'm not going to say it was bad, it was terrible, it was a dumb idea of WotC. There are a lot of people out there that are very outspoken about their dislike of D&D 4th Ed. And I'm not that way. I'm not outspoken about, outspoken negatively about the game system itself. I think the system actually is just fine. I think that it feels weird applying it to D&D because we've been so used to a certain feel for so long that D&D 4 felt strange. It used like power cards, and you had, instead of resting and times per day, you had times per encounter and times per hour and times per, like, it's all the same style of stuff, but it felt weird. And a lot of the powers, a lot of your abilities, there were very, very few things that you could implement that weren't just for combat. It was a very tactical, strategic, combat-based system. And, I will freely admit that any game system, no matter how combat-y and crunchy that you've got, you can turn it into a solid role-playing game. It's all about the stories, all about the characters, the narrative that you're putting forth, and that has nothing to do with the rules. But non-combat situations in a role-playing game can be difficult to make perfect if you don't have a game system that kind of helps back that up. And I think that's where D&D 4 kind of fell a little bit. Is that almost all of the powers, almost all of the rules, and the crunch behind the game were designed for encounters. They were designed for fighting, for defeating traps, for defeating monsters, healing wounds. All of things that are super action and adventure oriented, which is fine, but on that downtime and the kind of backstage conversations, you didn't have any game rules to back any of that up. And I believe that there is something to be said for the role players out there that are less socially inept, less about acting and less about talking and things, that need those game rules to back up what they're doing, that they'll get lost in those scenes. They'll find themselves drowned out, no matter how charismatic their character is supposed to be. If there are no rules that back that up, the player will have a hard time staying in the moment. And D&D 4 as an edition did not help that. And I think that's where a lot of that backlash came from, and why it could feel as a system, it would have felt perfect for some other games. When the World of Warcraft role playing game was announced, hinted at, teased, the D&D 4 engine would have been perfect for that. A kind of dungeon crawl hack, kind of the Hackmaster edition. I think D&D 4 would be perfect for that sort of thing. It's a great engine for action and adventure. It is not nearly as good of an engine set up for the intrigue and socialization that happens between those scenes. And I think that speaks a great deal to why 5th Ed has become so popular and so universally accepted. One of my very close friends constantly says that 5th Ed is watered down. He makes jokes about, how hit points are irrelevant if you sleep 8 hours. And he's right in the way, if you think of it in a realistic sort of way. But if I was going to play a realistic fantasy game, I would go find like Pendragon or Fate or something that doesn't have hit points that you just hey, I've been stabbed in the side and sepsis has set in, time to die. That's not what D&D is about. D&D is not that style of story. And I think because D&D 4 fell on such specific and very almost deaf ears, D&D 5 was held up as this immense, this savior of creation, because it does have a lot of the same feelings as 3.5 in places. It's very easy to adapt 3.5 monsters and adventures and things to 5th Ed. Shameless plug, Spelljammer. But you couldn't do that with 4th Ed. It wasn't an easy shift. That's not how it worked. And I think that any successful edition shift, if it's unbelievably different, like if it is just, okay, throw out the old game, here's the new game, there's going to be a lot of kickback. There's going to be a lot of players that dislike this new thing because it is so drastically different and the learning curve is huge. But the opposite is also to be said, is if you are making a new edition of a game and you make it basically the last game with a slightly different coat of paint, the players will know. They'll be like, oh, okay. That's so. Speaking of editions, Paizo created Pathfinder during the rise of 3.5, when D&D 3.5 was really just packed to the gills with product. There's so many rules and so many settings, and there's just you went to a game store that had role-playing books, and there was an entire bookshelf that was dedicated to nothing but 3.5 books. During that onslaught of 3.5, Paizo created kind of their own set of official house rules and just a little bit of tweaking here and there, and that is kind of what became Pathfinder. And Pathfinder, as far as, my local guys still say it's basically D&D 3.75. They took 3.5 and made just a couple of tweaks, and then boom, here's their thing. I firmly believe, Pathfinder, it's got its rabid audience, and it's about ready to go into a second edition. Speaking of editions, that from what I have been led to understand is pretty different than the first one. So we'll see how that goes. Maybe when that releases, if I get a chance to maybe play some at Gen Con, I'll come back and chit chat about it. But I think one of the reasons why Pathfinder was so successful, because it really did, it put Paizo on the map. Paizo before Pathfinder was basically a magazine they created Dragon and Dungeon magazine for WotC as an imprint, and they had some of their own stuff. They had a couple of source books here and there, but generally speaking, it was really a small company. And then D&D 4 happened. And when D&D 4 happened and everybody's 3.5 books became no longer a thing, Pathfinder raised its banners high and was like, hey, your 3.5 is 90% compatible with our Pathfinder, quote-unquote, 3.75. And I think if it wasn't for the fact that that WotC put out D&D 4, and it was so drastically different, and it had such a weird feel, it pushed so many D&D gamers to Pathfinder, because that felt more like what they were used to, even though it was a shift, and it was a change, and it was an update. It was still new and awesome to them. And it gave them that rush. It gave them the perfect combination, the perfect storm of that new adrenaline rush of new stuff coming out for the game that they love, as well as I don't have to replace my entire bookshelf full of stuff, and I still get to play the things that I love. And that I think that is what made Paizo. Since then, Eric and those guys have made amazing products, and their reasoning behind things, and their booth is always amazing at all these shows. So they have done tremendously well with the momentum that they were given. But I think that if it wasn't for the lukewarm reception to D&D 4, and I say that kindly, if it wasn't for that, Pathfinder wouldn't have had nearly the impact that it did, and it wouldn't have taken them as a company to the point where now they've got Starfinder, they're looking at Pathfinder 2, they've got board games and card games and a little stuffed goblin thing, and like as a company they have gone, they went crazy, they bloomed, they exploded in awesomeness, and good on them. Sometimes it's right place, right time, and I think that they had the right product at the right time, and it did wonders for them. And I think that any edition should be that way. So this whole edition wars concept, it's mostly mental. If you look at it, and instead of immediately shying away from change, is look at it and go, all right, is this a good direction? Does it make me go, ooh, am I excited about playing? And that is, by and large, the reason why these new editions, for us as gamers, why they should exist, is that it should reinstill that same, new car smell in the game that it did when you bought the last edition. And if it doesn't, maybe take a second, take a deep breath, play something else for a little while, and then come back to it and see what happens. Maybe some of the fear of change and the sticker shock is what's keeping you from having a really good time with your friends that are already playing. Speaking of which, so I'm looking at the clock down here. I'm getting ready to time to wrap this video up, because here pretty soon I am actually heading over to my buddy's house to witness the first game of the new Apocalypse rules for Warhammer 40K. Speaking of new editions, I used to love playing Apocalypse. I've got 30,000 points of Necron sitting on my shelf. That, although those numbers may have changed, it's been a while since I played them, but I've got a lot of points of Necrons on my shelf that hopefully maybe this new Apocalypse engine, this new edition of Apocalypse, will get me excited to get those guys back on the table and blow some stuff up and flay some flesh from bone. But that's what I'm doing later today, celebrating Colonial Day here in America. Some barbecue, some board games with my kiddo, and some friends. Which, after the week that I've had, it is absolutely everything that I want out of today. And like I always tell you, and I'm going to, let's go play some games. I'm the old one. Ooh, spooky ghost version. Ooh, ooh. Gar, 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 gar.